Good evening, beloved. It is another program today and a very interesting topic, which is gender-based violence against women and children. And as we all know that today it is the eve of the launch of the 16 Days of Activism against women and children and people living with disability. You are welcome to our wonderful program. Tonight we have our special guest who will share and advise us on how to deal with this pandemic, and we are here definitely to educate each other in order to curb this pandemic. I would like to introduce one of our first speaker, who is our beautiful Miss SA, and her name, we all know her name, Miss Shudufhadzo. Musida, about young women, educating women in gender-based violence. And definitely she's going to empower all of you young girls at home. So you are welcome. Miss SA, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. May I begin? So I think I've been given a very important topic, which is to talk about education and empowering young women, especially with regards to gender-based violence. I think the first thing is to just make sure that we are drawing a clear distinction that we're not educated. It's not about whether you're educated or not when it comes to gender-based violence. It affects all of us. I think my biggest thing is just knowing the importance of educating young girls, especially about the importance of consent, because I think that is something that most women do not know about when it comes to when they grow up. When it comes to gender-based violence, I think when it comes to education, we empower nations with education. But in this regard, we're supposed to be empowering them with regards to this epidemic. Actually, it's a pandemic now, but with this epidemic that is rooted in toxic masculinity. There's a lot of entitlement that comes in there, but as women, we should not be discouraged. We are strong and powerful beings. But I think everything starts with the importance of information. So educating young girls, educating young women is important, especially with regards to consent. Educating them to know that it is not about how you were dressed, it is not your fault, but it is basically a social ill that we need to combat as a society. I think my message to young women is that we can fight this together, but the onus is not only on us, it's on all of us, it's on the entire country or the global landscape in general. Where we have done our part with the movements against gender-based violence. There's still so many movements that are happening now. I think it's just important to just I think the message that needs to go out there that it's never the woman's fault. I think that is really, really important. It's never the woman's fault. And it's important to educate girls about that. When they say no, they've done their part. Now it's time to educate young men too about the importance of consent and how a woman is not something that they're entitled to. So that is my message to young women, that it is never your fault and you are powerful beyond measure. And education is important, but also educating your peers about the importance of consent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shudu. This was an intro, and then we will definitely discuss it deep. And then our next speaker is our beautiful Sis N. She's always there, looking forward to assist, looking forward to better women around the region, women in South Africa, and women in the globe. Sis N, kindly greet the viewers and a brief of what you're going to talk about.
Okay, good evening, good evening. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you again. Shudu and I were just in a conversation about an hour ago discussing what powerful things she's working on, and so excited. I think the future is in very good hands. Sis Thobeka, really excited to be able to be here in this conversation, but just to say that on the eve of 16 days of no violence against women and girls, first I want to say that for the United Nations, This is a very important day. It's a day that the Secretary General of the United Nations places great, great importance. And all over the world, you imagine this, that the whole world tomorrow will be having a conversation everywhere about this issue of ending violence against women. The issue is not a South African issue. It is not an African issue. It is an issue for all of us from everywhere in the world. And so as we think about what it is we're doing, let's also think about what we can learn from countries elsewhere, because this is a pandemic that has different forms in different parts of the world. So as we have this conversation, I hope we can be as practical as possible, because it is something that we're struggling with everywhere. But truly, until we change the trajectory of violence against women and girls, we cannot achieve gender equality. And so this is why this is such an important conversation. Thank you. Looking forward to it, Thobeka. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Sis Annie, because my question was going to be, is GBV a South African thing or is it a global thing? So you've just answered me. And thank you so much. I can see Shudu is nodding. So yeah, thank you so much. So we're going to discuss it deeper and definitely perhaps share what other countries are experiencing. Is it the same as perhaps the scale, you know, on be it South Africa is big on sexual violence and emotional violence, and other countries on which the scale amongst the countries, what exactly, and the gender, be it women, be it men, and be it the LGBTI community and all that. So we will get back to that. And then our next speaker, he is not yet with us, Lesego, I think. Oh, he's here. Lesego, I hear you are here.
Yes, I am here.
Oh, wonderful. You are welcome. Lesego, it is your turn. I'd like you to introduce yourself and greet our viewers. So a bit of my intro. We are calling Lesego Makhubela. He is the MP in Gauteng Provincial Legislature and ANC Greater Tshwane. So Lesego, kindly introduce yourself and talk a bit on what you're going to share today.
No, thank you very much. I'm a bit intimidated by the beauty of the women who are on the screen. Our newly crowned Miss South Africa, Miss Shudufhadzo. I'm very much intimidated. My name is Lesego Makhubela. I'm an MPL and I'm also a serving ANC Youth League Tshwane Regional Chairperson. Just briefly, well, the ANC Youth League in Tshwane felt that we should look at the matter of gender-based violence in a different or in a fresh pair of lenses. And what do we mean by that? We felt that we've been spending years on investing on victims of gender-based violence, which are women, at the neglect of perpetrators of these grievous crimes against women and children. I'll give you an example. A woman could be going to a woman empowerment seminar, come back very conscious, deeply empowered, and comes back to find a man sitting in the house, and that person will beat up the woman, kill her, rape her, or do whatever, because we have spent so much time dealing with victims. Women are not, and I think Miss South Africa was saying it, it's not their fault. They've done nothing. We need to begin to say, let's look at this issue in a different way and say, how then do we begin to empower perpetrators of gender-based violence? We held what we called a father and son camp. I think it's about 3 weeks ago, where we took young men and their fathers, and fathers who were without young men. We took them on a camp. We had a hike. We had conversations. We wanted to get to the root of some of these issues that we are dealing with. And I was shocked when we got to the summit of the mountain during a 2-3 kilometer hike at the views that were expressed by some of the younger men and including their fathers, we realized as the NC Youth League that much work has to be focused on the perpetrators of the bestiality of gender-based violence. Us men, South African men are sick, and you can't you can't spend resources so much, and it's good that we must empower women. They must know their rights. We must make them conscious. We must make them alive to all the issues that affect them and everything. But we need to start having a conversation with men, because even statistics tell us that a greater population of men, they live in communities, whether villages or townships, without any male figures in their life, without any father figures in their lives. And this contributes significantly to their future perspective. Thank you very much.
You're a good leader.
Thank you so much, Lesego. We are going to get into details about, especially about the camp. So you'll tell us more about how did you select and who was invited and what was the outcome of that camp. Thank you so much, leadership. And our next speaker is Advocate Joseph Radebe. Advocate, we had requested you to talk about the wrongly accused and who was sentenced. So in your introduction, I would like you to perhaps talk a brief about that, and then we can therefore expand as we would get to the crux of the topic.
Greetings, colleagues. My name is Joseph Norman Radebe. I'm from the Vaal University of Technology, and I'm here maybe representing Social Cohesion Advocate, but I'm speaking as an activist, as a member of society, and as a politician, maybe a union rather. My input for the day will be focusing on morality, vis-a-vis gender-based violence, perpetrators, and instigators. I will be speaking broadly, without casting any doubt, without being punitive, but focusing on the point itself. I personally believe that when we talk about gender-based violence, at some point in time, we are exaggerating it. We are neglecting the perpetrators, and we are convicting perpetrators before they can even be convicted in the eyes of the law. So I'll be taking that broader perspective, and I should not be judged, because this will be a life experience from the township situation to higher education situation. I'll be talking as is. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Advocate. Our next speaker is Nwabisa Dlova. She's from Masazane in the Eastern Cape. Nwabisa, kindly introduce yourself and greet our listeners as well as your co-panelist.
Greetings to everyone this evening. My name is Nwabisa Dlova. I am an activist. I am a women's rights advocate. I am an intersectional African feminist and a social worker. I work for Masimanyane, Women's Rights International in East London. I basically work with women because that's our main focus. I'm working with women and young girls. And this evening, I was asked to explore what poverty has to do with gender-based violence, specifically when it comes to young women and girls, and just exploring some of the ways that we could actually empower young women and girls into being able to stand up for themselves and into being able to challenge the status quo, and also being able to participate in the economy and the political sphere, because it is clear that even though we could say that we are enjoying fundamental freedoms, but it is clear that there's some of us that are not enjoying, and specifically maybe addressing the issue of inequality in South Africa and power imbalances. So yeah, I think I'll just end it there for now, and we'll explore it later on when we get deeper into the conversation. So thank you, sisters.
Thank you so much, Nwabisa. Our next speaker is Nontobeko Sibisi. She's the founder and the CEO of Bhubesikazi Investment Holding, and a speaker as well as an author. Sisi Nontobeko, kindly introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to talk about.
Good evening, listeners. Sisters, thank you once again for this opportunity. Our beautiful Miss South Africa, what an honor and a privilege to be here. Siyabonga kakhulu ngaleli thuba to be able to engage on such an important topic that is affecting and eating up our generations ahead of their time and stealing from them. Mine today is from a very interesting perspective. It's from a perspective of having experienced gender-based violence, personally having overcome and being able to rebuild myself in mentally, as you started off by saying, it's not only physical, but how do you overcome mentally by seeing the person who inflicted the pain on you as not the culprit, but shifting your mindset to a perspective of understanding your purpose, your character, and your role in life over and above the pain in the encounter that you've experienced. So I'm not going to only speak to women, however, I'm going to speak mainly to men, to understanding that and finding your purpose in life can help you minimize and actually prevent yourself from finding yourself in situations and circumstances that lead you to becoming a violent individual. So in a nutshell, Jay, it's all about that, discovering purpose, character, and shifting your mindset towards the challenges that we are faced with, and how do you overcome that? Thank you very much, Sister Thobeka.
Thank you so much, Nontobeko. This is very, very, very touching, and already I am very emotional. Why am I emotional? Because we have done lots of research as we're preparing for the program. So we've had research from those that are instigators, be it men or women, and those that are victims. So I just want to say something before I come to you, Ms. S.A. At some point in my journalism days, I had covered a story of a young girl. She was 7 at that point in time, and one of our favorite culture that is done every September in SA, that girls will go for ukuhlolwa, and this young girl was found as not being a virgin, and that was a misdiagnosed from the person who was doing that. And me being a journalist there, and now this child became an outcast. And he was the only one, and now other kids were excited because they've got the results. And now this one was crying. So a mother in me, I had to take off the cap of being at work and focus on this little one. And we had to go to the family of this little girl. And this little girl, the mother had passed on. There are 3 girls, and the other 2 girls, as her siblings, were also tested, and they were found as they are still virgins. And then, so we had to go, and they were staying with their uncle. And now already the uncle was found as a perpetrator, because people would think that the uncle could have been, maybe. So we had to, in fact, when I got back to work, I reported that this is the situation, and is it possible that we can take it further? So we took this situation further. We had to, my office, they had to arrange that the girl goes for the test, and we open a case, and until to the final stage, only to find that this little one was not even raped, was not even penetrated. Nothing happened to her. And the daughter, in fact, said, Etika Letemba, you know, the hymens are different. So, you know, so the thing is, are these people a professional to simply say you are or not? And that is on its own, it's a situation that it has changed the destiny or the thinking of that child, or the entire emotion had changed. So in this situation, the uncle became a kind of a perpetrator, but there was no proof until we had a proof, because everybody was thinking now that the uncle could be a perpetrator. So I want us to take this scenario and look at, in this situation, how many kids that are going through this, and how many people that are misdiagnosed, and therefore others that have become perpetrators, whereas they are not. So can you, I'll start with you, Shudu. In this situation, what would you perhaps inform, empower, and educate our community?
The situation of gender-based violence, right?
No, the scenario that I just spoke about.
Oh, all right. I think there's a lot of stigma like attached around gender-based violence. I think one thing that you mentioned was the fact that the girl was not even harmed, if I'm not mistaken. I think the problem with such distinctions, I believe, is that it takes away from a broader scheme of what's being done around the country. You know, it's always like, okay, if one person does not tell the truth or whatever, then it takes away from the one person versus the 99 that were telling the truth. So there's a lot of stigma attached to it, I believe, and it's important for us to, in as much as there are cases like that, to not really dwell on them. I think not really, by dwell I don't mean that they should not be taken seriously, but we need to shine the light more on the majority. I know that that there's going to be a speaker that speaks about wrongfully accused and that kind of stuff. But then I think what I want to speak about is, in as much as those cases exist in this country, women are marginalized, and this is a global thing. They deserve a voice no matter what. Sometimes some don't use their voices like truthfully, but women deserve a voice no matter what. I think education needs to be around people, everyone having a seat at the table, men and women, whereby we don't only teach women to avoid being hurt or being raped or being victims, but we also teach perpetrators the importance of consent, as I mentioned earlier, and their behavior. Because I think we often focus on girls avoiding being raped, girls avoiding being hurt, but we never really place focus on the fact that perpetrators need to be addressed, and for any change to come about, everyone deserves a seat at the table. This even starts with kids, kids, the importance of consent. That's what I really advocate for, because I feel like for any change to come about, it starts by teaching the new generation about the importance of consent, everything that there is to know about gender-based violence, because it's not going to fix itself. It's really not going to fix itself. And to try to shield children away from the truth about the country, or even the truth about gender-based violence, would just be detrimental, or even reverse the work that's being done in the grander scheme of things. Yes, there are cases where everything's not always truthful, but then the majority of the cases that exist are truthful, and they're not being heard on a larger stage. Women go to the police station and they're not believed, they're even sent back, because they're not believed. Yes, there are cases where there's a level of dishonesty to it, but then we should not take away from the majority that exists, which is the fact that women are dying. Women are being killed every single day. The stats are really, really alarming, and it's time for us to address that as a society, because it doesn't only feed into the gender-based violence itself. It's got ripple effects to mental health, which is something that I'm very passionate about, like PTSD. Our society is hurt. Our society is hurt. A lot of them are suffering with PTSD. A lot of them are suffering from mental health illnesses, depression, as a result of gender-based violence. So we need to address those things in our society in order for any change to come about. We need to address the problems that exist without taking away from them. I think with a conversation like this, it's quite important for us to speak about gender-based violence, not only from a woman's perspective about what she was supposed to do, what she could have done better. It's about how men can do better, how everyone can do better. We all need to, like I said, have a seat at the table and speak about these things and fight this a global issue together, as Anne said, like it is a global issue. It's not a South African problem. And I think it's in, they're having a same problem. I think it's in Namibia, if I'm not mistaken. But when you read about these things, you realize that it's not a problem that only exists in South Africa. It's a global issue. So how do we start having this conversation with regards to, when we say education, we're not talking about educating young women. We're not only talking about empowering young women, we're talking about getting everyone at the table and saying, listen, this is what's happening. These are the real facts. This is the reality of our country. This is the reality of our world. Women are being killed. They don't even live to tell the story. They don't even live to be empowered to even tell the story. Most of them, some of them are lucky, but we need to address those issues from a perspective where we address that. And yes, there are a few cases where there's been dishonesty, and I'm sure one of the speakers is going to cover them. But I just think the main focus should be on getting every single person at the table and letting women know that it is not their fault. It is, in as much as they're not believed, we need to create a space where women are given the platform to speak and use their voice. And that starts with addressing so many socials, but also how you can see that it informs so many things in our society, such as mental health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shudu. Indeed, I agree, it is not our fault, and we ought to be free and wear whatever we feel comfortable to wear. And certainly this needs to be more advocated. Sis Anne? Oh, before Sis Anne, we have people on the Zoom that are not speakers. With humility, we are requesting that all that are not speakers kindly go to Facebook, because the link is only for speakers. Thank you. Please don't be angry with me. Thank you. Okay, Sis Anne, the stage is yours.
Now, I can say many things. So I think, do you want me to go over all the stats and talk about what's happening with this across the world?
I would like you to talk about what is happening in South Africa and the region, and tell us the stats, and then as I will also go through the stats that I have, but I would like you to just take us through what is happening around the country, what is happening in the region, and how are other countries dealing with it. Perhaps we can learn from other countries as well.
Sure, thank you so much. There's so much that one can say about what's happening on violence. But I think the first thing is to say that as we launch into 16 days of no violence against women and girls, tomorrow is the International Day for No Violence Against Women. And its Secretary General has a campaign that he calls the Unite Campaign to End Gender-Based Violence, Orange the World. So from tomorrow, we wear orange until the end of 16 days. And it's really to provide a color of hope. It's really to showcase hope, and hence the use of orange. I think the important thing to say about gender-based violence in our region and in Africa is that it's got different nuances. We've got countries, and we find, excuse me, that in Southern Africa, for some reason, the dominant form of violence is intimate partner violence, but in particular sexual violence. So while we do have high levels of domestic violence, somehow sexual violence seems to be a much stronger feature in Southern Africa. And in fact, in some parts of the world, they sometimes call us the rape culture of the world. But I don't know if any of you has dared to watch the prisons on Netflix. It's a show about the worst prisons in the world, and actually points to Lesotho as the highest concentration in any single prison of sexual violence inmates. So if we look at this region, what we do find is that Violence is common across all the different countries, but we find that some countries have even stronger. So Lesotho is and it's relative to the size of the country. It's a small country, so it's not the same level of numbers. But somehow for Lesotho, sexual violence is very dominant. This is the same story that we find in South Africa. Across the world, there's over 240 million women who experience intimate partner violence every single day. So this is, I mean, every year. So this is an annual figure that we know. In South Africa, 26% of women report intimate partner violence. That's 1 in every 4 women who reports intimate partner violence. And this, you know, there's both sexual violence, there's domestic violence, but 26% of them are intimate partner. We've just completed some research in South Africa around citizens' voices, like what, you know, and we conducted a study with over 7,000 women, in particular, women over 18. And we found that of those 7,000, that the issue of intimate partner violence is not just from your partner, but is also from family members. And that's a big, big concern. Now, whether it's step parents or it's a distant relative or who it is, that's one of the things that we need to take a deeper look at, because lockdown actually showed us the level of intimate partner violence inside our own homes. And so this issue of intimate partner violence is definitely one of the areas that we are hugely concerned about. And about 40% of the murders of women that we find across the world come from an intimate partner. And it's estimated that, you know, there's something like 100 to 140 million women who are killed every single day. So this is a global figure. But if we look at South Africa, I think we have had data that really points to the fact that we have had, you know, depending on what figures we look at, we had figures last year of over 87,000 cases of intimate partner violence that were reported by the police. But we also have really 1 in 3 women in the country who experience violence in the country. You know, I don't have the specific data with me on the actual levels of violence in the countries around us. But what I can say is that Southern Africa, whether it's Eswatini or Botswana is found to have very, very high levels of violence violence in general, not necessarily just violence against women, but violence in general. And those figures are very, very disturbing because where you find high levels of violence in a society, you also find high levels of gender-based violence. So I can give you lots and lots of data, but I think the important thing is that we are dealing with a pandemic that has been completely normalized in our society. It's a pandemic that we get data on a daily basis and hear about the number of people who are experiencing violence, and it's just another number. And that's, I think, the nature of the normalization of violence is one of the biggest issues that we have. We've been conducting research led by UN Women, but across all the UN agencies, and working with the government and civil society partners to try to take a look at what is driving this, and why is it that we have the levels of violence that we have. And we identified 2 major issues, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the men who were speaking to really reflect on this issue. It points to 2 major things. The one is about the stereotypes, the norms, the culture, the beliefs that men have about their right to violence over a woman. And so this is one big area of work, and we call it toxic masculinity, we call it patriarchy, we call it, different things, but ultimately there is a sense in this country that that violence is normal behavior, that this is what we do. And I did research many years ago that pointed to young boys who actually believe that coercive a sexual encounter is normal and is what girls expect, and that girls never say yes anyway, so it's part of courtship to actually have a violent experience. So there are deep beliefs that need to really be challenged. I think another thing that is of big concern, is the second one, is the normalization, the fact that bystanders watch violence and don't then do anything about it, right? So these two, for us, are two of the biggest areas that need to be sort of challenged. Linked to that is the issue around conviction, attrition, and response to violence. You know, in Gauteng province, in about 2 years ago, there were it was only 22% conviction rate out of 45,000 cases that were tried. The irony of this is that if there were 45,000 cases tried, we know for sure that this is only perhaps 10% of the cases that even got to the point of reaching trial. So the truth is that women have lost hope in the system and don't even report. So we've got less than 10% of women who actually report their cases in the country. And it's because they don't believe that even if they do report their case, that there's going to be any difference. And so this is a big piece of work that we're doing, is to try to look at how to streamline the criminal justice system and to create a real responsiveness at all levels of reporting. Out of 4,000 people arrested for GBV during the lockdown in March, only 130 of these were convicted. It's difficult for us, even as across the world, for us to really get to the bottom of conviction rates and attrition rates. This is a big issue, and it's an issue that I think, Sis Thobeka, we need to discuss more. Where do the cases get lost? And what is the culture that allows and gives permission to cases to be dropped along the way as if they are inconsequential? And so this is one of the areas that for us is a big concern as the UN, and there's a whole team that are looking at the response system in what is called the GBV referral pathway. Where is it that we lose the cases? Is it at a clinic, or is it at the police station, who are usually the entry points? Or is it when they get to a social worker and then they're told go back home? Or is it a family member who persuades them to go home? These are the concerns, so that as much as we have numbers of violence, and I can keep talking about the data on the number of women who are violated, what matters more for us is how do we actually respond to that and give women a fighting chance to be able to turn the page on gender-based violence. I want to talk about one more thing, which I think is a big focus right now on this issue of the theme for this year. The theme for this year is fund, respond, prevent, collect globally. But I want to talk about the issue of funding of gender-based violence. And just to say that globally, what we know as the UN is that we have anywhere from 1 to 3% in general, on the global average is between 1 and 3.7% of the economic cost of violence to society. So as we speak about the economic recovery, we have to take into account the fact that the cost of violence is significant. And it's anywhere between 1.2 to 3.7%. About 5 years ago, there was a study done in South Africa that pointed to about 42 billion as the cost of violence that was sitting at about 1% of GDP. So if at the current rate, where we're at about 4 trillion Rand GDP, if we assume that that's about 1%, that's about 40 billion still, depending on where we sit. It could be 2%, it could be anywhere between 40 and 80 billion is the annual cost of violence to society. And that cost comes from the loss in productivity, the cost of clinics, the cost to the justice system. This is where the costs are. This doesn't even look at the emotional costs. And we know that emotional violence is massive, and it's an area that we struggle with actually confronting. And so if we are going to think about dealing with violence in a serious way, we have to be able to know that our investment has to be equal to that 80 billion if we're going to do anything in undoing the scourge of gender-based violence. And so the kind of work that needs to happen is where each one of us, and we have quite a bit of work with men, and I'm happy to see that we're going to have a conversation with men. We believe this is very important. Women have been on the streets, we have demonstrated, we've had placards. What we now know is that after 25 years of our Beijing conference that built the blueprint for gender equality, 25 years down the road, violence is still one of those areas that we've not made any progress. And so we were able to identify reports from everywhere in the world pointed to the issue of social norms and stereotypes as the work that still needs to get done if we're going to make a difference here. And so we work with men. We have a program here in South Africa called the He for She Taverns program. We work with the social justice program of the Justice and Peace program of the Catholic Church. And this program is our community activists who work with men in taverns. So they're dealing with the issue of alcohol. Do you know, Sis Thobeka, that research was done during lockdown that showed that if bars and taverns close 2 hours earlier, just 2 hours earlier, it reduces the murder rate in the country by 44%. So the link between violence and alcohol abuse is a serious one. And it's a serious one because there is such a high level of alcohol abuse in the country. And so the taverns work is really working inside taverns, but also we work with men in Stokvels. So really about finding men where they are. And I really am looking forward to hearing from the gentleman who's going to talk about going to the mountains and really hearing about how do we start changing the social norms in the environments where men sit so that it's not okay in that environment and that we are beginning to hold one another accountable and actually are watching out. So some of the things that happen in our taverns, we've changed the hours in some of the taverns. They now close by 10:30 or 11 o'clock so that men can go home and become responsible fathers and husbands. But we also then work and ensure that in these taverns, women are escorted home so that they get home safe. And so there's many different small things which seem like small things, but they make a big difference to the way in which these issues are dealt with. So speaking to Shudu, the issues of mental health are massive. And so we know that there are norms, stereotypes that have to be undone, even in the workplace. And institutions perpetuate violence and harassment. And this is work that we are doing also at the UN to end violence and harassment and the normalization of violence and harassment. In our data, we know that 80% of parliamentarian women across the world experience psychological and physical violence during their term as parliamentarians. So imagine that. You can't go about doing your work without the expectation that you will be abused. I have way more to say, but let me stop there for now and you can ask questions and I'll add on. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to Lesego, and can you kindly explain to us the emotional violence? Because in our research, some women are saying, yes, we are unable to report our cases because we are going through emotional violence. So how do we address that? Which definitely goes back to the mental issues and all that. So, but how do we perhaps address that? Because some people, they really do not talk about the actual issues that they're going through, but they would always say, we've got the emotional abuse that, you know.
Yeah.
So how
I mean, I think that there are many reasons why we have this kind of emotional abuse that we need to unpack so that we can determine what the intervention is in each instance. The emotional abuse I talked about earlier is about violence and harassment in places of work. And there's a lot of emotional abuse there, manipulation, power games, you know, in relation to jobs and work. And so there's a lot of insecurity that comes in that kind of space. We are working a lot with organizations in the private sector and the public sector to ensure that there are very clear recourse opportunities in institutions so that if, you know, and they must be able to have them as anonymous or done in a way that ensures that you're not victimized by the institution where you are. So that's one big piece of work that is in institutions. The other one obviously is linked very much to economic vulnerability. And we have found lots of research that is being done that shows that economic vulnerability is a big driver of the kind of emotional abuse that takes place. So money is very much at the center of a lot of this. And so one of the areas where I think we've been quite weak at but it's an area that I know South Africa is raising quite strongly up now, is looking at how interventions are coupled so that we're paying attention to who is economically vulnerable. Now, let me just give an example. We have seen from the police commissioner and from the Minister of Police the announcement of the 30 hotspots in South Africa. It's interesting that if you look at the hotspots are either in informal settlements, or they're in townships that are not necessarily very strong economically, or in rural areas. So there's definitely an economic factor there. And so one of the bigger things is to identify how, as we deal with these hotspots, do we begin to look at how do we use economic interventions as an actual gender GBV response, rather than separating the economic response as you know, from the GBV response. So that's one piece of work. Of course, the other one is about the just emotional and mental ability to just make the decision to get out of your situation. I mean, we know about the Stockholm syndrome and the history of psychology that shows that you get so caught up in that context that you're in that you cannot even imagine what freedom feels like or looks like. And so in many instances, the abused remain in context of abuse because for them this becomes normal. And the only way to deal with some of these are real serious psychological, psychiatric interventions. And these are difficult. Increasingly, there are online support systems. And I know that some of the work that's happening increasingly, and I'm sure Shudu can add quite a bit on this, is real psychiatric and psychological support systems that are available for women everywhere, so that social workers know how to direct you there. Church members know how to direct to confront the emotional issues is much, much more difficult than it is the sort of, you know, let's deal with the provision of services and so on. But I do think that for women, the one thing we're very strong at is collective action. We work together a lot. We have our church groups. We participate in these communities. And so we've been working with faith-based organizations. We've got a movement that we're calling Faith Action Against Gender-Based Violence. And one of the areas that they're looking at is really looking at this issue of emotional and psychological support, you know, through the church, because we've got so many people who are women who come through the church, and being able to call it out, being able to encourage women to speak about it, but also to give them the tools to work through the steps to get out of that kind of a situation. And I think this is the only way to do it, is to work through the different collective structures that women have. Imagine if this was a topic of every single Thursday prayer meeting that women participate in, church women. We already are beginning to create a movement that supports, you know, and support structures to help women to step out. The last point is to say that there is increasingly conversations about driving perpetrators out of their homes rather than women being driven out to shelters. What that looks like is they have them in different countries now in the world, where when a woman reports abuse, the man is taken into a kind of correctional facility until such time as the trial goes through, and you can then determine what the outcome of the case. But this is something that we haven't dealt with. The focus really is on the victim, and the victim, you know, suffers multiple forms of violence beyond the actual original violence. And so this is something that we have to deal with. And if you did that, then you have the space to intervene on the emotional and psychological side, because the woman now is not living in fear that she's going to be murdered by her partner in the home.
Thank you so much, and we've got solutions. I think when we round up, this is the pointer as solutions. We will definitely focus on them. And then Lesego, it's your turn, and please take us back to the father and son camp. And also, I am not so sure if you can also talk to us about Mr. Peterson's book. So perhaps we can relate. I've been looking for that book and I can't find it. And so it's one of the books that I was informed that it's one of the books that we need to promote for sons and fathers to. Oh, wow, Sis Anne. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. We'll talk after this, Sis Anne. Lesego, please therefore address us on the father and son camp and what is the vision and how are we going to, or rather as a solution, how do we bring it as a solution?
Well, as we would have explained before, that we feel that there's been some sort of a misdiagnosis that we'll be able to end gender-based violence purely by focusing on the victims of gender-based violence. And that's why year in, year out, the statistics keep on going up, where the victims of gender-based violence are piling up to an extent that even the President of the Republic, President Ramaphosa, has actually declared gender-based violence in our country specifically as the second pandemic. And it means that all that we've been doing for all these years, trying to curb and end the demon of gender-based violence, we have done nothing but actually to go through the motions, and that we have not even started to scratch the surface in terms of combating this. And this became clearer to us as the ANC Youth League in Tshwane, as we said with young men and their fathers, and also men who have adopted young men in the communities. There is something very interesting that is happening in our country, because South Africa reports a very high incidence of women and girls who experience gender-based violence, but yet almost no data exists on men who are victims of gender-based violence. And hence South African-based organizations, NGOs and so forth, working towards gender justice, inevitably focus on vulnerable women and girls and on provision of support for female gender-based survivors. And there are virtually no services provided for men who have experienced gender-based violence victimization, apart from trauma counseling offered, and also that the trauma counseling is only offered for people who are in the LGBTI community organizations. If you go to the most recent statistics on crime in South Africa released by the South African Police Service, it offered for the first time sex disaggregated information when it reflected crimes committed against women and children. These crimes included sexual offenses, and no mention was made of men as victims. And so the question is, why is it so difficult for boys and men to be seen as victims of gender-based violence? And this is one of the things that, as we sat on the mountaintop and having conversations with these young men and with grown men as well, reflecting on all these things that are happening in our country, these are some of the things that came out. That a lot of some of the young men get to be raped, like women get to be raped when they are girls, and sometimes they get to be raped when they are very young, and they keep it inside. There's also information that even in our correctional services, in the prisons, a rape of men by other men is the order of the day, or by gangs. Men they get gang raped in prison, men get raped in prison, and all sorts of things. And there's nowhere to report it, right? If a man gets raped and he goes to a police station, raped by their uncle or by someone they know, they go to the police might even laugh at them. So one answer to the question as to why is it so difficult for boys and men to be seen as victims of gender-based violence is toxic masculinity, and this is something that is happening. Amongst others, these rigid notions of what constitutes a real man, restricts emotions which men and boys are allowed to show public. So most of the time, some of the victims of sexual abuses who then continue to replicate this, and hence we are saying and we're defining men as sick. Men are sick in this country. They are sick because they carry so much pain. Some of them, they carry so much hate, and they take it out on those that they see less than them. And unfortunately, most of the time, it is women, right? So amongst others, these rigid notions of what constitutes a real man restricts emotions which men and boys are allowed to show publicly. In particular, men are expected to be dominant and to frequently express anger as well as to show control, whilst expressions of vulnerability are so-called even defined in our cultures as feminine. Men can't cry, it's women who must cry. Men can't complain, it's women who must complain. So emotions such as fear, sadness, vulnerability, and pain is prohibited. And any male individual who expresses vulnerability is likely to be demeaned, by dominant alpha males and to have their personal masculinity questioned and belittled. And that's why men take some of these crimes that have been committed against them as young men, whether those who are raped in their homes and others and so forth, they keep it to themselves, and sometimes they take these secrets, these deep-seated secrets, they take them to the grave. Hence, many male survivors of gender-based violence and sexual abuse are likely to invest strongly in concealment of their trauma, because public disclosure, particularly of experiences of emotional and physical trauma or vulnerability, risks some of the survivors who are males of being objects of derision for men who are heavily invested in policing toxic masculinity. And hence, survivors' immediate experience of trauma may be compounded by public disbelief that men and boys could be victims. So we have not created a society that allows men who then become victims of gender-based violence to then be able to ventilate their pain, to then be able to report the crimes that gets committed against them. They keep it, it becomes toxic. It poisons their souls. It consumes them up until they replicate the same crimes. And these crimes are taking a different fashion every now and again because they mutate into femicides, they kill, they do all sorts of things. So I read a book about a few years ago, and I read this book because it profiled somebody who did not stay far from, from where I grew up. In Attridgeville, there was a serial killer who targeted women who were jogging in the morning or who were going to work. He stayed not too far from where I stayed, Moses Setole. In Attridgeville, those who can remember Moses Setole. So this guy, as you said, she was raised by a single mother and was raped by one of the boyfriends of the mother. Became a monster, when a stalked woman hunted them, raped and killed them, I'm sure even if he is to be released, I'm not sure if he's still alive. He was arrested when I was a little boy. If he is to be released, he might even continue to commit the same crimes. Statistics also tell us that some of the men who get to be incarcerated for crimes, that the gender-based violence crimes or for raping and so forth, when they are released, they are more likely to replicate the same crimes. So it means that society has to change the manner in which it views this challenge. It means that we need to have a different spectacle of how we then begin to deal with this particular issue. Because what we have been doing, Siswami, it's not working. You know, we say take a girl child to work. We say women empowerment seminars and all these sort of things. Yes, they are empowering the victims, but they are not empowering the perpetrators of gender-based violence. We need to invest heavily. That's why the camp was about that. The camp says the South African statistics tell us that a lot of young men grow up without father figures. A lot of young men grow up without men in their lives or fathers in their lives. And what becomes a role model is a porn star on the movies that they watch. What becomes a role model is men who tell them that for you to be a real man, you need to be able to beat up your woman. If you love her, you must beat her, and all sorts of things. And that's why one of the on the declaration that we made the young men and their fathers to sign was to commit that the fathers who don't have sons must then be able to go to communities, identify male boys and adopt them, become example to them. Let's change the conversation. Yes, let's empower the victims of the bestiality of men, but also let's invest on empowering the perpetrators of gender-based violence. Women think that if they organize themselves into groups, into social clubs, into some of the most deprecated ideologies that one would have seen, into all sorts of things. They think that by organizing themselves, they are actually defeating gender-based violence. And the more you see women organizing themselves, it is the more the statistics become alarming, and the more the crimes against women and children become more gruesome. We saw a video of a man now on Sunday. This guy abducts a 4-year-old and an 11-year-old who are both sisters, takes them to a hotel, not even to the mountain or somewhere, takes them to a hotel and begins to rape them, and is found by the hotel security full of blood and sees nothing wrong. It means we are failing. And that's why the Youth League in Tshwane says, let's change the conversation. Let's begin to organize men. Let's begin to speak to men. Let's begin to empower men and rescue men from their ignorance. Let's begin to educate them in ways in which we have to treat women, in ways in which we have to respond to rejection. Because if a woman says they no longer want you, a man in the township where I come from in Atteridgeville, when a woman does not return your love, you are taught by the township that you must beat her up. Let's teach them differently. A woman empowerment seminar empowers Nwabisa and everybody else, but does nothing to empower the perpetrators. Thank you very much. I'm a politician, by the way, so I speak, I can go. Oh, we can't hear you, my sister. We can't hear you. Unmute.
Thank you so much, Lesego. On this note of rejection because of relationships, I think that also we need, you guys, you need to actually understand, because the same guys are dumping women, and women must deal with being dumped, you know, and the men cannot accept rejection. I mean, it's one of those things that we need to converse on, that, you know, it's really, yeah, one of those things. And then I just also want to agree with you. I've got some stats on 80% of rapists are being motivated through fatherless families, or be it the father is completely not known, or just not even part and parcel of the upbringing of the child. And as well as the in most of the juveniles institutions. So most of the homes are also fatherless homes. So definitely I support what you are saying. I think Sis Anne will also agree with me as a collective as well, that what you are doing is exactly what we need so that we all are capacitated, both women, men, young women, as well as girls. Before we call our next speaker, who is advocate, I would like to call Shudu to say her final words because she needs to dash somewhere.
I just want to say thank you, Sis Thobeka, and to the previous speakers. I think one thing that has been prominent in all their discussions is the like what I spoke about, which is bringing everyone to the table. It's not a woman's issue. It's a global issue where we all need to be involved to bring about a change. I think through this conversation, we see the importance of the platform that we have in order to discuss such issues, because we're great to learn a lot from different perspectives from one another. I think in the next 16 days, it is important that we educate everyone, not just a select few. We don't teach women to learn how to not be abused, but we teach everyone about how gender-based violence on its own is a disease, you know. And I think it's time that we, as people, take up our collective responsibility to bring an end to this. But that starts by bringing everyone to the table and everyone being accountable, especially men, I believe. So thank you so much for providing me with this platform. It was beautiful, and thank you, Sis Anne. It was good seeing you again. But for all the stats that you gave and everything that I learned, I made a few notes because this conversation does not end here. This is a conversation that needs to be had every single day, not just for the next 16 days, because women are dying, and it's time for us to change. It's time to change the narrative. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Shudu. We really appreciate you and we love you. We are behind you 100%. And kindly invite us to your other projects that you're doing. And Sis Anne will tell us more about what we've been discussing. So we want to be part of that as well. Okay.
So thank you so much. I'll invite you.
Okay, my dear, you're welcome. Our next speaker, we introduce, who, in fact, we have done the introduction. Advocate Joseph, kindly come on board.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Really, this has been an insightful dialogue so far. But I'm here challenging everyone to look at this in a different perspective. Look at this wearing different perspective or spectacles. Let's focus on a need to educate young girls and men on morality. Why am I saying that? I'm going to paint two scenarios. I'm going to paint an ideal Friday and Saturday in the institution of higher learning. Friday and Saturday in townships. The mood is when you go to any entrance, any residences or houses in a higher education institution, you will find expensive cars lining up for students. It's an example. And those should not be misconstrued as a conviction or whether I'm supporting the gender-based violence. But I'm talking from a practical perspective. On a Friday, you'll find girls, small girls in the institution of higher education, inviting men, inviting business people, inviting politicians in the higher education environment to take them for whatever drinks and so forth. As a result, at the end of the day, you will find that a person has been killed, a person has been a subject of drug abuse, not taking into consideration ukuthi girls are inviting at times these ill behaviors that are meted on them. I would just like to imagine a situation where girls are selling themselves or are giving, just to be blatant, sex for money. You go to a conference, there will always be girls lined up for those who are contesting or for those who are politicians to entertain them at the exchange of money. How do we address the issue and educate young girls on morality? How do we educate young girls to be financially dependent? The government has went as far as giving them an NFSAS into their own pocket. They do not use that NFSAS money to buy food. That NFSAS money is being used to buy booze, is being used to buy drugs, and is being used for alcohol. Come to a township scenario. You know that you are not working. You know that you don't have money. How do you go to a shibin? How do you go to a tavern and expect that you will be entertained in that kind of environment without even having a transport money? So, well, what I'm trying to say here, let's not all paint the situations of girls, young girls, as being victims. At times, they are inviting. Maybe at times they're even agreeing to each other, because nowadays we are even seeing prostitution being professionalized, prostitutions being legalized in South Africa. So, well, what are those policies telling us about the moral fiber in society? I'm igniting these conversations because these are conversations that we are not engaging with young women. We do not educate them to be morally responsible in society. We engage with them as victims. We do not engage with them as perpetrators. A practical example, here is this girl who is inviting a man into his hostel, her hostel. The man is expected to buy grocery. A man is expected to buy garments for her. A man is expected to buy booze. What will be the expectation or the ideal expectation from that perspective? Surely in return, this particular victim would have brought this to herself, because there's no way that you can bring a person to your room, subject that person to an exorbitant expenditure and expect nothing in return. I'm not saying I'm supporting that gender-based violence, but I'm saying that we are inviting this kind of treatment that is meted against them. So let's take a different approach as a collective and begin to drill deep into what causes gender-based violence. We know there's a general attributes like your poverty, there's a general attributes like your financial dependency. But how do we zoom into education? So I'm challenging colleagues that as much as we are convicting men for being perpetrators, let's also note that men can be victims. An example, an ideal example, students in higher education, they do not study, particularly women, they do not study, and they expect to get marks at the end of the day, good marks for that matter. There is one lecturer in my own environment who somehow got caught or engaged in such an arrangement with him, only to find that they had a consensual agreement relating to marks, that I give you marks, then you give me sex. So in that, where is the issue of immorality? As we speak, that particular lecture was dismissed, was apprehended, and was convicted. But it was from a consensual agreement between the victim and a perpetrator. Let's take an example of a grade 11, because there is now a phenomenon of washing a pen and washing an exam paper at the end of an examinations. With that behavior, these young girls find themselves being subjected to alcohol and drug abuse. And as a result, it is difficult for them to go home. These young men who happens to be there, maybe by luck or by being a boyfriend, will keep this girl maybe for a day or two. At the end of the day, after this case has been reported, not knowing what has transpired, but by a fear that when she arrives home, there will be a hell to pay, the girl decides to implicate the boyfriend, saying that she has been raped. With the kind of law enforcement that we have, we'll go and apprehend a boy without subjecting that boy to a thorough investigation, without testing the veracity of the case itself. The boy would have been convicted. You spend 5 days, 5 years in prison for a crime that you have not committed. That all resonate in the moral fiber and the decay that our society is subjected to. So when we are engaging on this matter of gender-based violence, let's apply those different lenses. Yes, not all cases are as wrongfully convicted as I've explained, but I'm saying that there are those about 15%, if not 20% of cases that are not legit. There is no study, if I might say, there's no study or research for that matter that shows what is the percentage of those who have been wrongly convicted. From my take as an activist with our intervention, what we have done in my own environment, we have established, particularly I was a co-founder of that, I've established Ubaba Okoto Men's Forum. It's a forum of men in our society around Vaal, Sidibeng to be precise, to nurture and to adopt these boy figures. Begin to actively engage them in the community conversations. To begin to encourage them to be active citizens. Encourage them to participate in sporting activities, because those are the environments that will take them away from these environments which are not fit for purpose, that will be your shippings and taverns. NGOs that we have in our own communities, they no longer play a significant role that is meant for NGOs, but for something else. Those are the vehicles and the structures that we need to use in our own communities to mobilize these young men and begin to inculcate the spirit of morality within them. So let's check the conversations that we are having with these boys. Where are they held, first and foremost? You take a gender-based violence conversation at Dalakoso, right at the city center. You end up attending as officials, not reaching out to the perpetrators and the victim of gender-based violence. So what I'm saying, our approach in addressing this matter of gender-based violence should go wider, should go broadly, and begin to diagnose the root cause. Alcohol is one of them, drugs is one of them, extortion by those who claim to be victim at times. Because I will, knowing that I'm a politician, I will date a girl, a young woman for that matter, maybe a student, but they go there with an expectation that at the end of the day, I will be having 1,000 rand. Guess what? I don't have that 1,000 rand. In the morning, the hell is going to break loose. So we need to be able to distinguish between the genuine gender-based violence practices and those that are not genuine, and begin to deal with those that are not genuine. Because as we speak, just think what psychological trauma would have been to a person who have spent 5 years in prison for a conviction for a crime that he has not committed. So I'm saying broadly, the approach that we need to take is education, education, education. Family structures are the most important structures and initiatives that we need to do. Adopt a boy child. Do not only adopt a boy child by taking him to sporting facilities and so forth. Educate a boy child. Take a boy child to higher education institution. Take a boy child to a Saturday school. Take a boy child to a Sunday school and build a future out of that boy child. I thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Advocate. This is also very deep, and we, as part of the research as well, we have cases that parents are saying, my son was convicted because of this and my child did not do. And in fact, even worse, before one would talk about the parent, but the same person who was convicted would actually say, I was convicted for what I did not do. And definitely, I want to say every life matters. So we wouldn't want to promote women only, whereas as well men are going through stuff. So I want to say, and with the support of you guys here that are promoting and educating men, we want to say we are also behind you. We know these stories. You go to churches, you wear the cap of the pastor, you would hear a child coming to you after ministering from I do schools ministry. So you'd find young boys coming to you saying, but pastor, this is what happened to me. And we say then in the spirit, that is a destiny destroyed and you need to pray and all that. But indeed, you also need to talk about these issues that they do happen. So every child matter, every person matter. We need to take care of each other. I want to go back to that, say that I don't know what happened to that project. I think it was started by our late and former president, Nelson Mandela, that every child is my child. I think we ought to go back to that spirit that every child is my child. So we need to take care, we need to raise these young ones in that manner of take care of each other, be your brother's keeper, be your sister's keeper. Thank you so much, Advocate. In the same spirit, I just want to call Usis Nontobeko to come and share with us on how do we have this. She's in the space, she's in the skills development space. How do we have, let us now not talk about the challenges, we've heard about the challenges, but how do we penetrate in assisting both young boys, or rather young boys and young girls, into economic being empowered? Sis Nontobeko.
Thank you, Thobeka. And I'm just so thankful that I was placed where I am to contribute so I can have extensive time to listen to what was said. And I would just like to firstly emphasize on some of the points that were mentioned by a previous speaker. Can you hear me? Usis N, he mentioned very important points about intimate partners playing a vital role and having proven statistically that they contribute more than any other towards most of the cases for gender-based violence. And Ushudu said something very important, that this is not a South African issue, but it's a global issue. And I'm just going to highlight the points that they said, bringing it home to the point that you've mentioned. And then Joseph spoke about something that I personally also believe in the fact that it begins with you. We teach young people so many things about life, but we forget the responsibility of being accountable to yourself. When I talk about accountability, I'm talking about the way that we are conditioned as children. We are raised to think that my mom has a responsibility, my dad has a responsibility, my aunt has a responsibility, but we forget that we are responsible for our actions, and our actions are stemmed from our mindset. From our mindset comes our internal dialogues and attitudes towards life. And the cases that Tupu Joseph has given, I will give two scenarios of a woman who's empowered into a position of a CEO in modern society, who's a top shot, but who's married to a man who doesn't have the same power. This man is a daily worker who earns a salary, yet his woman comes back with a package which is triple his salary. But these people started a journey of love, but this journey later became of power, because the woman was now given the rights by society to see herself at a certain level, which is great. However, this woman sometimes misplaces her power because she doesn't know, she was not raised to utilize this power in the right way in her household. That's case number one. The other case is she's raising a daughter who is seeing this, how her father is treated, how her father is belittled, how her father is looked down upon, and she goes out and starts looking down on men, expecting them to bow down to her, expecting them to worship the ground she walks on. And should she not get what she wants, she's got rights. She will sue them, or she will open a case of abuse and rape. What do we have here? We've got a scenario of women whom we are raising and we are giving power to, who feel entitled to things in the world that we live in. But we have men who do not have an idea of how to engage, to love, to live with these women. Where have we missed the point? In the way in which we have conditioned these two. How have we shifted the manner in how we rewire the way our girls and boys see each other? Upu Joseph spoke about morals. Morality comes back to the fact that before you can see me as a woman and as a man, you need to first, before you see me as a woman or as a man, you need to first see me as a human being. That's a point that we've forgotten. And that is the one point that we are not taught in being brought up. I personally didn't know how to appreciate another person for just being uniquely themselves. And I believe that that is the education that is decaying in our society, where we don't acknowledge people for just being themselves. Our boys cannot see a girl as just a human being. They see them as a sex object. And some women do not see a boy, but they see them as an ATM. So the question we should ask ourselves is, how do we recondition through our system, our schooling system, through our upbringing system, our girl and our boy child into a new paradigm shift of firstly seeing one another as human beings and being able to value one another for just being who we are, before we can talk about what we can bring to the table. And this begins from being a male and a female. You then move to a path of being a woman and a man. And becoming a woman and a man requires a formation of character. And the formation of character will require an individual to have an intimate conversation. The president said something very profound in his speech a couple of days ago, counting down to the 16 days of activism, which begins today. He said it is time for all of us who live in this country to confront our challenges directly, honestly, not through violence, but through dialogue. A dialogue doesn't begin outside, Sis Thobeka. A dialogue begins with Nontobeko in front of the mirror. Many of our boys and girls are not taught to love themselves. There are behaviors which we are condoning, which need to be curbed from the perspective of how our children see themselves. Wearing a short skirt or a long skirt, whatever length my skirt might be, and assume that whoever meets me owes me a drink. How do I begin to think that? Who fell out of the sky and is entitled to taking responsibility of my desires? I need to account to my thoughts towards myself, because my thinking influences my behavior and it has an impact in my overall environment. And that responsibility of accounting for our thoughts is not there. We come from a background where our country has experienced gruesome pain and oppression. Post-apartheid, we did not have a conversation on how do we heal ourselves from having seen dead bodies on the road. Our men were stripped from that position of having seen gruesome pain and death, even our women. And automatically that image was converted, that anger, that desire to release that anger was converted and internalized and is released in different parts of our lives. There needs to be a conversation about that. What happened to the pain? Who hurt you? How did they hurt you? Who must you go and apologize to? We've spoken extensively about absent fathers. These absent fathers themselves did not have fathers. They ran away because they don't know how to father. They were terrified giving this child because their fathers were not there. So going back to the point of how do we do this, Sis Thobeka, it begins with you. Pick up the mirror and look at yourself at some point in your life. You need to stop pointing fingers and wanting your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your president to be accountable for your behavior. You need to take ownership and responsibility of your life and decide on what you want. I personally will share testimony that when I had experienced a traumatic encounter of being raped, I had a mind block for 10 years. Sis Thobeka, I didn't know who I was. I hated every part of myself. And when the snippets of images come back, because psychologically your mind can block out a pain. And when this pain resurfaces again, and pain and the pain that I had experienced, I was releasing it in different ways. I was drinking, I was partying, I was expressing it, but in nuggets. It wasn't fully exposed. But at a certain point when my mind was ready, it came to me that you had been raped, you had been violated. I was angry. I felt humiliated. I felt dirty. I wanted to strip off my skin. But the true question was, what are you going to do about it? Not what my mother has to do, not what my society will do, not who took what from me, but what is the courageous step you are going to take to deal with yourself and your demons? Because when you went through that encounter, it was only you and the culprit. The culprit is elsewhere. The question is, you have yourself to deal with. Will you live? Will you walk yourself back to healing, or will you choose to stop your life and end it now? That's it. And I believe that we have to urge our young women and men to take responsibility and learn to listen to the dialogues that they have with themselves before we can talk about the changes that we want to bring in the external environment. Themselves. We are sugarcoating, we are protecting wounds which should be dealt with personally and privately in the closet of the mind. And I believe, in conclusion of my point, I believe that we've got keys of shifting a culture where in the way in which we condition our children from playground, a boy and a girl playing, let's stop teaching them firstly that that's a boy, that's a girl, that's a human being. Can you acknowledge that? They have gifts, they've got talent. Yes, they are a female, but can you acknowledge that? Can you respect that terrain? Can you learn to protect them as much as you want to be protected? Because we miss the human element, the right to be a human being, before we can talk about my sexuality. Because you are able to invade my sexuality, violate me, because you only see me as a female, you don't see me as a human. And we need to remove that barrier from the eyes of our boys and our girls, because as it's been mentioned, that boys are also being raped and they are being led alert. You inviting them to a table full of your girls and saying this boy must pay for a 5,000 rand bill and walk away and smile. Would you do that? Would you do that? Go and pay for a bill full of men sitting after they've eaten and drunk. How would you feel? Let's learn to account. Let's learn to be responsible for ourselves. And I believe if we took that responsibility and resuscitated the morality of seeing people as human beings, respecting who they are, acknowledging their presence, we will not have such conversations in our schooling system, in the manner in how we treat ourselves. But most importantly, Sisi, I'm wrapping up, the emotional aspect. And we spoke about economic vulnerability. We do not want to neglect the importance of spiritual life in any human being. There is no person who's a God who has the right to touch and take any human being as they desire. There is a God who's above you. And most importantly, you need that God to help you assess internalize, process, listen to your thoughts, how you view yourself, how you talk to yourself. It has nothing to do with circumstances. Everybody has been through pain, but we choose. It's a choice. The quality of your choices determine the quality of your life. No one owes you anything. And that is important that it is known that it begins with you by making the choice in your mind to move forward, to honor yourself and honor those that are around you. Ngiyabonga kakhulu, Sis Thobeka.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nontobeko. This is way deep. And indeed, the quality of your choices determines your life. And there's a say as well that says, show me your friends, I'll tell you your future. So indeed, it's important as well, the association that you keep, will definitely determine who you are and where you're going in life. And our next speaker is Sis Nwabisa Dlova, a social worker and a public educator. Sis Nwabisa?
Yes, Sister. Hi, Sister.
Yes, so please, the stage is yours. Take us through the question and what we have requested you to talk about. Does poverty instigate women to be perpetrators? And also talk about your experience as a social worker, situations that you've been and where you would find a woman being a perpetrator and a woman, especially those that are victims, we know, and the men who have been a victim. So I would like us to go there. We have discussed that, except if you have something new that we did not touch, then we can touch on that.
Thank you very much, Sister. As the beginning point of whatever that I'm going to say is, at any point, at any time, when you walk into a room, you would find that the women in the room, they know of someone that has been violated. But you would ask from men that if they know someone who has violated someone, they wouldn't know anyone. And point of departure for me being that whenever we want to talk about the issue of morality, whenever we want to talk about curbing the scourge of violence, in as much as our point would actually be wanting to address the issue of men as perpetrators, but at some point it turns and it becomes being about women not being responsible enough to protect themselves. My starting point would be actually making an example about myself. I come from a family of staunch Christians. I would love to say that it is my family. They believe so much in God, and we grew up not wearing certain things, and and even today, I really love to check at what I wear. The clothes that I wear, they don't reveal my boobs, they don't reveal my thighs, they don't reveal my my armpits, because those are the parts that are labeled as sexual parts. But guess what? In as much as I have tried to protect myself, to make sure that I don't go to shebeens, I don't go to taverns, I study at school so that I don't do sex for marks, or whatever it is that is there that is actually being said that women do this and they're calling on themselves violence. Guess what? I still got violated. I still got sexually violated without showing my boobs, without showing my thighs, without showing anything that is sexual in the manner of morality. But I still got sexually violated. Now my question is, now that there was disciplinary hearing against the person who sexually violated me, and then there was nothing that was done after that, does it mean that he didn't do it to me? Or it means that he did it, but he just was not found guilty of it? All right. But I think that part is not what you asked me to talk about, but I felt compelled to actually address that part, that when we talk about morality, can we talk on both levels or both lengths. Can we talk about women and morality? Can we talk about men and morality? When we talk about responsibility, when we talk about accountability, can we address both? Can we not have a one-sided approach where we are specifically addressing women that because of your lack of morality, this is why it is happening to you? And I feel like what we are then doing when we do that, it is doing away with everything or the progress that has been made since I don't know when the struggle for women's human rights or the rights of women. It is undoing all the work that we have done because now the focus has turned. It is looking at women as being the ones who are calling violence on themselves. And if how, I don't understand, maybe, I don't know, maybe I am taking it personally, but I don't remember waking up specifically on that 1st of December 2016, thinking that today I want to be sexually violated by someone that I trusted so much, someone that I spoke to on a daily basis, someone who was a manager to me. I don't remember waking up that day and feeling that, you know what, let me actually call upon myself this. And I remember correctly that on that specific day, I was still wearing this the same way that I wear on a daily basis. Nothing was showing. Now, back to the point that was being asked, that can women be instigators of gender-based violence and femicide? Now, my first point would be, we cannot discuss anything without discussing the first point, which is intersectionality, which is understanding how aspects of different, how a person's social and political identities can create different modes of discrimination and privilege. So when you look at the person's gender, the class, the sex, and we look at race, we look at sexuality, religion, ability, physical, color, appearance, and everything, then you would then want to, when you want to talk about gender-based violence in South Africa specifically, you would want to understand the unequal power relations. You would want to understand the socialization between boys and girls. You would want to look at privilege and power and control. You would also want to look at the gender pay gap. You'd also want to look at the nature of South Africa of being unequal. No matter where you go, you always find that there's hierarchies of the haves and the have-nots, of those who have power and those who do not have power. Then when you want to look at the economy and you want to look at how poverty then affects women, then you would have to actually start there by addressing the issue of inequality in South Africa, and to address the issue that from the beginning, it was never dealt with. There's always hierarchies of men seen as superior and women seen as inferior. And you would have to look at the issue of education. You would actually look at how during the process of socialization, you would find that men or boys, they are being socialized into taking leadership positions, while girls are looked at, they need to take positions of actually nurturing, maybe even Nwabisa ending up being a social worker because she's a woman, she's feminine, she would understand, she has empathy, and she understands, so she has to become a social worker. And for a man, which is something that has been mentioned over and over again here, the issue of toxic masculinity, that for a man, you have to be aggressive, you have to be dominant, you have to, when you come into a space, you have to make sure that everybody feels that you are here, and you are not only here and physically here, but everyone has to basically be aware that you are in the room, and it has to show through the way you address people, the aggression in your tone, that, oh yes, here comes a man and they are going to talk. So then women then end up like, I think it is something that we have seen that has exposed, that were exposed during the pandemic, that many informal sectors, women that work in those informal sectors, they lost most of their jobs. While on the other hand, those who work in private sectors like lawyers and advocates and chartered accountants and whatever, they still maintain their jobs. But for women who are selling on the streets, for women who depend on selling on the streets, or the small businesses, they had to close down because the pandemic hit hard on them. They're still even today struggling to get back to that. So do then women instigate? Are they instigating gender-based violence? Because now we're going to look at how women are dependent on men for their means of survival. So let me get back to me, and being an educated woman working, and also noting that should I actually think that I would actually want to take the organization that I was working for further, for actually not taking into consideration the issue that I was sexually abused. What then happens to me as the person that actually takes the organization maybe to CCMA or whatever those platforms are? What happens to me then? Even if the person maybe is found to be to have perpetrated sexual violence against me, then what happens to me? Because you know what? One thing that I've realized and learned about perpetrators is that they build a system of being trusted. And we also, our social norms and standards have normalized to say that if you know someone on a personal level, you could say that, oh, he's a pastor, he's a manager, he's this, he is this. He could never actually do that. He's an advocate. How could he actually jeopardize his work like that? He could never do that. You are just trying to ruin him. You want to sabotage him. Women hate black men. They don't want black men to go forward. So in order for us then to understand why women end up in positions where they are seen inferior and men are superior, and men are in better earning jobs and women are in lesser paying jobs, and women in workplaces, they are not safe and they constantly have to look over their shoulders to ensure that there is no one who is actually following them, then we have to go back there into understanding how do we then say that women are instigators of gender-based violence. Like, I actually do want to understand that, is there any point where someone wants to wake up and say, today I would actually say that I have been raped? Because I think it's something Shudi said, that yes, it is not that there are no cases where women said they were actually sexually abused or raped or anything, and it turned out it was not true. But how do we then focus on a small number of people that actually lied and leave a huge number of women that actually were sexually violated or actually violated in any way? How do we then move from focusing on specifically on these women that lied and leave the focus on the ones? Actually, I wrote the stats that was shared by Shongwe, that of 40,000 cases of gender-based violence during the lockdown, only 130. So you ask yourself, then what happened to the remaining number? So in order for us then to understand and address the issue, then we have to talk about economic empowerment. And when I talk economic empowerment, I'm not talking about women have to go and sell chickens and women have to go and start farming. I'm talking about actually women penetrating the economy at its very highest level, and women seen as people that can actually make decisions, and they can actually be in leadership positions instead of actually being looked at as people that can actually just be of assistance to someone, deputy director, deputy this, deputy that, or assistant what, but as people that can actually think for themselves, as people that are actually capable. Because if then we don't start down there at socialization, where the children are growing together. Because I actually love to make an example of how girls at a very young age, they are made to be people that are nurturers, people that are carers, people that should place other people before themselves, and while boys are just left there to grow up and be, even the colors that we make boys wear, we make them wear blue colors because the sky is the limit for them. But for girls, we are making them wear pink clothes, like the flowers at home, and we can pluck them out whenever we want to, because it actually feels like we are at the position where men feel like at any point when they want to pluck out a certain flower that has been assigned to women through gender roles, they can pluck out, they can just kill at any point where they feel that they want to kill. They can actually rape at any time where they feel like they want to rape, because there is this sense of entitlement, there is this sense of wanting to control women, there is this sense of wanting to overpower and be in control. So if we are not starting there at the socialization, and as they grow older, we start the conversations, and the conversations that don't only come through the 16 days of activism or on August 9th, but conversations that are ongoing to make young women to realize their worth, to make women understand what consent is, because even if the person is there and they're wearing whatever that they are wearing, but if there is no consent, then we need to hold that perpetrator accountable, whether there is morality or what, but person has to understand that they have to be taken accountable, and they have to take responsibility for their actions. Because if we then want to understand consent, we have to start at what do we mean when we say consent? Are we then going to say that women, they were wearing this and that, wearing whatever is not consent? And when we also say boys will always be boys, then we are making it very problematic, because we are saying that boys cannot be held accountable for their actions, because it seems as if there's this nature that makes them to be unable to control themselves, or to control their sexual urges. And we are making it as a norm, or when we normalize that whenever men feel like they need to satisfy their sexual urges, then whoever is available, then they can actually do anything to them, because at the end of the day, we're going to justify that what were you wearing, what were you doing there? Because I mean, if you can have a 2-month child being raped by their father or their uncle or whoever, like, what does this say about us? Does it still say that the person was wearing revealing clothes? If a grandmother of 80-year-old can actually be raped in their own house, what are we saying? Are we saying that they were also revealing and they were actually calling violence on themselves? We cannot say that, because the person was at home and they didn't even know that on that particular day there was someone who was going to come into their house and rape them. So education should go both ways. And I agree with the person who kept on saying that education. And when we educate, we need to place everyone on the same level of understanding. We cannot have other people being held more accountable because you have to protect yourself. You see what the world has turned out to be. You have to do this. You can't walk at night. You can't do this. And specifically talking to women. But when you come to the very same level and educating boys, it's a different narrative. It's a different narrative of what morality is. We can't do that. We need to hold each other accountable on the same level. And we need to understand that the entitlement that we have on each other's bodies is the one that is putting us to where we are, that many years later, since we have started the conversation about gender-based violence, we are still here and actually making a point that we need to believe survivors of gender-based violence, because I'm thinking of someone who is a victim of violence, who is listening to this conversation and thinking to themselves, did I call this upon myself? What is it that I didn't do on that specific day to protect myself? Because I'm also sitting here and thinking to myself, what is it that I didn't do right on that specific days? Because I had survived for 25 years. And on the 26th year, I got violated. What is it that I did on that specific day that made that man to think, you know what, this one should be one of my victims? Then we need to understand that when you are not being believed, and you, every time when you bring the issue of violence against women, you have this counter argument that also men get raped. And for me, I feel that it would be very important for us to discuss the issue of men being victims of sexual violence without outshining the lived experiences of women. Because if for me, you come and say, when we talk about violence against women, and then you bring a counter argument that also men, then for me, it feels like you are actually doing away with the experiences of women, or you are saying the rape of a male child is more important and needs to be addressed more than actually addressing the lived realities of thousands of women all over the world who have experienced violence. So when we then talk about skills that need to be to have women to invest on, we don't only talk about oh no, you need to protect yourself, you can't drink as a girl, you can't do this, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't drink, I don't go to shebings, but I still got violated. So then I think maybe then the conversation should also then also be about me, that what is it that I didn't do on that specific day that I got sexually violated. The conversation, don't do this, do that, don't do this. So I think, yeah, my time is up, but one thing that I wanted to emphasize is the issue of the inequality that persists and shows up in every conversation that we are having, that we are unequal, and it means that when we are unequal in that manner, it means that we will always have these differences, and we will actually never actually get to a point where we get into interventions. Yeah, thank you very much, sisters. Sorry for going beyond time.
Thank you so much, Siswam. We really appreciate. Indeed, these are the conversations that we need to have so that we can keep the sketch of gender-based violence. So we need to continue to advocate on this. Our time is almost up. I would like everyone to say their conclusion. So it will be just a second on every one of us. Sis N.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Thobeka, for this, because really the reality of the conversation is that there is a lot of us who are doing a lot all over the country. And I think where we need to focus our attention is coordination. I have heard several different men from different parts of the country who are working with young men and traditional communities and looking at working with young men, but I don't know whether they're coordinating. I don't know whether there is a sharing of experience. So if there's one great outcome of this would be for us to look at how we can make linkages and start coordinating. We have a platform that we run in support of the National Strategic Plan. We meet every second week on a Thursday at about 1 or 2. And we're trying to coordinate these different activities according to the National Strategic Plan, which has its pillars on prevention, on response, and so on. So as I listen, what I hear, and I participate in multiple panels all the time, and there's a lot of things that we're doing. But I think that unless we all have a way to create a platform that puts everything into one place and we're able to exchange information, the chances are we perpetuate this because we're just creating wonderful islands, small islands of excellence, but not being able to impact on the macro level. But that said is to say, really, I am so happy to hear every one of the inputs that were made because they really are strong ones. And really, thank you so much for the platform. Maybe we can talk about you and I can talk afterwards about how to connect some of those who are speaking here into that broader coordinating platform. Thank you.
Perfect, sis, and thank you so much. I have noted that. We're definitely going to talk about that. I thank you so much. And then Keida Lesego. Lesego. Okay, let's. Keida Lesego. Okay, let's pass it to Lesego and then go to Nontobeko. Nontobeko, your last words?
Thank you so much, Sis Thobeka, for this opportunity and for the input from all the valuable speakers. I think my last words would just be, let's continue with the dialogue, starting with our families. Let's recondition, let's create those vulnerable platforms on our dinner tables where we can talk about this. Let's make it our daily food, that we talk about what's hurting you, who hurt you, are you okay? Because as we do that, we normalize the fact that it's not right to be violated, and you have the right to express yourself when you don't feel comfortable when someone touches you. So thank you so much, Sisi, and thanks for all the other speakers. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nontobeko. Indeed, we'll start with our families on the dinner table. I think that is our way forward note from you. And to Sis Nwabisa.
So my last word, Stokes, is that like Usisi we need to have these conversations. We need to constantly check up on ourselves. We need to check about our stereotypes. We need to check our biases. We need to check on how do we enable rape culture to continue and violence against women to continue. What is it that we are saying and what is it that we are doing that enables this culture to continue going on? And I think I echo the words Ukuba. We need to have these conversations in our small families and with our friends. We need to hold each other accountable. We need to call each other out. We need to know. And I think the most important thing for me is to learn to be in a position where you are able to learn, to unlearn and relearn, and understanding that you don't know everything, and you need to learn from other people when they come forward and say, this is my lived experience, this is what has been happening to me, and you need to listen and not only to listen to respond, but to listen to understand. And we can only do that if we continue with these conversations. And I think I would really love to have these conversations going forward with maybe Shudufhadzo and everyone who was in the panel, that how do we continue this conversation, not only for the 16 days, but also going forward, how do we constantly have conversations so that we get comfortable with each other and we get comfortable with being called out and understanding each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sis Nwabisa. From you, we've taken that learn, unlearn, and relearn. So each one teach one. Each one teach another. So thank you so much. This is what we're going to do as well. And we will definitely keep in touch after this and take this forth. Our next person to do e-closure, his close remarks, or Advocate Radebe. I think Advocate Radebe, I think it's left already. And do we still have Lesego? Lesego? Okay, Lesego is gone. Okay, I just want to thank everybody for tonight. This was very deep and sensitive, and we hope that we'll continue to have such conversations on this platform, so that people must know. And I definitely know that whoever that is listening and watching might actually identify themselves in whatever that has been said today, be it direct or indirect. So we just want to make our country a better country, and we want to leave a legacy that South Africa, our kids will be proud of. So let us take this conversation forth, and let us continue to build a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world. With that, we just want to say, just to apologize on Umem, Deputy Minister, with Sport, Arts and Culture, Mafu. She is a parliament. She just sent a message right now, Uguti, they are still a parliament abakaqambi. So kindly forgive us for not having her, but certainly I hope in our next she will certainly join us. And by the way, it was a birthday a week ago. So happy birthday, or happy belated birthday to her. To all our viewers and listeners at home, in the country and around the world, we love you, we appreciate your presence. This program won't be this program without your presence. And I just also want to thank our speakers who said yes when we approached them to come and share and talk to you. We are saying to you all, we love you, and may the good Lord bless you, and may the Lord God South Africa, God bless our president and the leadership of this country. We love you all. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Sister Thobeka.
And we forgot to inform about the helpline contacts for all who would need to contact any of the shelters or any, suppose they need help. So we've got them on Facebook. All the numbers are there. So we hope that people will definitely keep in touch and contact every organization that speaks to them. Thank you so much.
This is a good one. I want this one. It's a good one.
Program Director, my name is Joseph Radebe, again a participant in the gender-based violence dialogue that took place yesterday. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Zazi Production, to thank Department of Arts and Culture, the Vaal University of Technology for participating in this thought-provoking dialogue aimed to deal with the scourge of gender-based violence that is meted out against women and children. It is in this regard that we are indicating as an institution that we will be establishing the Victim Empowerment Center, the first of its kind in higher education, as a response to the President's call on gender-based violence and femicide. We are calling upon all NGOs, we are calling upon all men's forum, we are calling upon all institutions of higher learning to follow suit and indicate to the world that South Africa can do better. South Africa can be a space, a safe space to cohabit. Gender-based violence is not in our name. Enough is enough. I thank you.